Hey, hello everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to Thursday Night
Yes,
Live.
we did it.
All right, we did it. We're here. So usually I took over hosting for the top of the show by accident, but Mike Elson over on my side over here, CEO, founder of VoiceLessons.com. Hey, I'm Matt Edwards. I'm part of the VoiceLessons.com educational team, working on online courses, lots of exciting stuff coming up ahead. And we are super, super thrilled tonight to have a very, very special guest with you. One of my colleagues from the CCM Vocal Pedagogy Institute, an incredible teacher who has lots of experience in the classroom, working one-on-one with private clients and training other teachers how to do this thing that we call functional voice training. So Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you. Good to be here.
All right. So we'll just kind of dive on in right here as people keep coming on in. The topic tonight is teaching young singers. And this is a thing that we get a lot of questions about. Mike, you were just saying you had somebody today reaching out, right?
Exactly, yeah. So we've got our new matching system. We've been talking a lot about that in the past. So if you haven't heard about it, go in, sign up, create an account. If you're a singer student, you sign up. We match you with a coach, right? And so one of our coaches said, hey, I got matched with this student that's, 8 to 11 years old, but I only start at age 12. So, let's reassign them to a different teacher. And so I just thought, hey, that's a great topic. There's a lot of things, to discuss. So Ed, welcome to the show again. It's good to have you, and yeah, can't wait to learn more. I always have good discussions with you. So,
well, then let's just jump right in and just kind of hit the ground running with just the big picture. What do you see in your work as the big picture difference between teaching adults and young singers?
So, I think that the biggest difference is probably point of view in terms of adults just tend to be more specialized in the kind of music that they want to sing. They've experienced more types of singing, they've experienced more kinds of listening, and they've experienced more artists. They sort of know what kind of things that they want to sing, and from a repertoire standpoint, they tend to be a little more laser focused. I think that with young singers, the difference is that it's our job as teachers to provide as many different opportunities so that they can sing jazz, they can sing contemporary songs, they can sing Disney songs, they can sing musical theater, they can sing simple folk songs, they can sing simple classical songs. And you really don't know what's going to sort of light if they're just singing all sorts of different things. We're not limiting the voice in any way, but exploring how many different types of ways that they can use the voice. So maybe later in life, they will say, you know what, I never thought I'd like classical singing, but I really love it. And I want to sing in my community choir and do the Handel's Messiah in December. Or they all of a sudden say, you know what, doing CCM music and doing acapella music at the collegiate level is fantastic, and that's enough. But I think it's sort of our moral imperative as teachers of young students to just give them a broad palette of sounds that they can make from a functional standpoint, so that they can learn styles, learn different kinds of music, listen to different artists, and increase their sense of possibilities with the voice.
So how often do you think that, since you've been doing, you've got years of experience watching these kids, how often have you found that a student identifies what kind of stuff that they want to sing in high school, and that's the only thing that they ever do? So is it common that a student says, hey, I'm going to be an opera singer, and that's the only thing they ever do? Or is it more common to watch them kind of explore lots of things? Like, because I know a lot of adults, they already have their mind kind of set up. And I've heard you talk about this before, about trying to make sure you expose the students to multiple things.
It was very funny. I had a student who graduated high school several years ago, and it was very interesting and I don't know whether I agreed with this opinion or not, but it was her opinion, so it was fine by me. But she came to me as a belter, and slowly we went into the world of classical music. And she once said to me, and I don't know if I agree with this, but she said, you know what, sometimes I just feel more sophisticated when I'm doing this classical literature than when I'm doing the CCM stuff. And I think that for her, it was this singing in head voice and singing long lyric lines what just blew her mind. She had never thought that her voice could do something like that. And what my job was as a teacher was just to make sure she could do both, that I wasn't limiting the possibilities and not even really focusing toward one thing, but allowing her to do both. A wonderful challenge for her was that she was the lead in her high school show as a belter, and she was doing classical auditions for music education programs at schools. So each lesson, it was checking in with both sides of the voice and making sure that both were working, so that she had really good success in both. And she did great as a lead, and she got into all of her schools. So it can be done, but it requires a real effort on your part as a teacher of continuing to coax the voice in both of those directions so it doesn't get stuck any which way.
Yeah. Even at a young age, it can be done doing multiple things.
My belief, yes.
All right.
Yeah, I'd say, it might even be more advantageous, right? Exposing them to more different styles and different ways that they need to exercise their voice. So, speaking of that, this is a great question. So how do you work with changing voices? And the reason I'm asking, I'm thinking back to when I remember going through high school and puberty and the voice cracking and the teasing and the different things like that, right? So you've got that, both men and women, we go through that. So just what kind of advice do you have for, teachers and singers regarding the changing voices?
So let me divide this into 3 different categories. So to try to explore the options, we'll have natal males, natal females, and the trans voice. It is fascinating that in the last 10 years of teaching that area of students who identify as trans, that identify as non-binary within the high school level, used to be seniors, now it's freshmen, that the idea of voice identity becomes its own thing. So let's start with natal males, because that's the one that most people associate with this issue. And a couple things that I really believe in is that try to keep the boys in their head voice for as long as they can. And it's difficult because so much of masculinity can be associated with their voice and the change of the voice. So once they hear that they can make these low sounds, a lot of these boys experience the feeling that they want to make these low sounds, make them really loud, and the voice tends to get stuck. So you have a functioning child voice, and then all of a sudden the voice just drops and gets stuck there. And it takes me as the high school choral director some time to sort of get it out of that place. Some students that are boys, their voice just kind of naturally just kind of falls down, and those are the exceptions, but it happens. I think that one thing that's been important for me was that my voice change was so bad that it's at least allowed me to be empathetic to their plight. Every day the student comes in, the voice might be just working differently, and you have to be on your toes as a voice teacher. Make sure that you have some program on whatever devices you're using that you can transpose quickly and frequently, because it might be that a student who is singing a song in one key one week may sing in a totally different key the next week, and may go back to the old key the next week. So that flexibility on your part as a teacher is critical, because you want these boys to continue to sing. You just want them to feel really positive about their voice and really like they're going to get through this and be okay and be whole as humans. Our voices are so connected to us, so that's important. For natal females, there is a voice change there that a lot of younger teachers don't recognize, so that when often between maybe 7th, 8th, 9th grade, that the girl's voice will develop a breathiness to it, it will develop a weakness. And what happens for a lot of these girls, and we can talk about the vocal models that they have, not judging the vocal models, they are what they are, that many of these girls will only find power in their chest voice, and their head voices will become so weak that if you're a choir director working with sopranos that are 8th graders, they may have a very limited range and may not feel any power there. So not only are they feeling bad about their voices, they're singing this music that they can't really sing very well, and they have to kind of get over to the other side. So it's really important that we think about the repertoire that we give these students, so again, that they feel successful. That said, when the students that I have that go to high school, if they're in the treble chorus during the course of the year, they're going to sing soprano some of the time, they're going to sing alto some of the time, just so that their voices have as many possibilities as they can. And that the students don't start thinking, well, I'm a soprano. I'm always going to be a soprano. I can't do that part because I'm a soprano. We don't want that language. We want that large palette of voices.
Yeah. What do you? So you mentioned the female. I was thinking it's worth since we got a couple of people in here talking about this topic that's not typically discussed. The reason that all that's happening with the young women is that mutational chink. And if you're not familiar with what that is, I'll see if I got a model. So we have in the back of this is the larynx, right? And so the vocal folds connect up here at the thyroid cartilage and they come back. Oh, there's my erase board. We're keeping it real.
Let's hope you don't have that down in your larynx.
Yeah, that would be bad. But so these are the arytenoids in the back, and the arytenoids help swing the vocal folds open and close them together. And the muscles that help close them together are this arytenoid muscle and here and the lateral cricoarytenoid muscle on the side. And what happens in the mutational chink is that these muscles are a little bit too weak to fully close the vocal folds together after they've changed in size going through puberty. And, you know, there's lots of discussions about how to handle that because am I right, Ed, that you got to be careful that you don't rush the process, but we also then don't want to shy away from it. So, like, how do you deal with it? Because that is a question that comes up a lot in workshops that I teach. I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
So what a lot of girls will do is that they will press, and it's almost like jamming the vocal folds together just so that they can get that clear phonation. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are exercises that you can do that are gentle that allow the vocal folds to close a little bit more, and maybe, I mean, dare I say the word, just press a little bit more for very small amounts of time, just so that they can feel and hear that their voice is going to get over that sound. But I think part of it is that there is going to be a little breathiness for a certain amount of time. And as long as you keep exercising through the breaks, through that change, up and down all areas of the voice and all register qualities, all volumes, all vowels, that eventually the body is so smart and it will take care of itself in so many ways. And I think that if we rush that process, I think that the other side is just going to be problematic.
Yeah, because they end up compensating by squeezing those extrinsic muscles. So what are some of the exercises that you use to help them experience what closure is, what closure feels like?
So I hate that the first thing we always go to is any semi-occluded vocal tract exercise, SOVTE.
Hey, they work. Why wouldn't they work? Yeah.
So a pal of mine hates to use the straw exercises, so I will not talk about straws, but I will talk about other things. So something as simple as a hum is going to be probably the least stressing exercise that a young singer could do. Just really light, making sure that they're in all parts of the voice, that they're not stuck in chest voice and trying to bring that chest voice up, but going from top and down, going from down up. Also, any NG hums, that sound that we have, so that there is that feeling of closure. A W sound can be really nice. You got, so there is that feeling that this aperture is really quite small, but there is sound going through it. And I think that any sort of buzzy sound, while I'm a singer who does not feel a lot of sensation when I sing, I can feel those vibrations. And hate to say it, now that students are wearing masks at school, the vibrations on masks are really quite extraordinary. If you have a mask that's sort of touching the lips. So when the students feel that, it's a really obvious sensory sign that they're doing something right and that they're feeling some success with that.
Huh, who knew masks were going to help? All I've heard is they don't.
Wear your mask.
Yeah, we had a question last week about masks giving people nodules. But we talked about it's because they don't hear themselves and they over talk. It's not the mask. It's you're talking too loud. Now, so that's on the biological female side. And here on the show, we tend to talk either testosterone dominant, estrogen dominant, because at the end of the day, whatever your gender identity is, the dominance of the vocal folds determines what sound you make, and that can change. Even if you are someone who identifies as female from birth, you may notice some hormonal shifts that make your body a little more testosterone dominant that change your vocal folds, right? And so in that estrogen dominant singing that you're talking about, that mutational chink is the issue. That's what we're working with. If you're working with a singer who is more testosterone dominant, especially going through puberty, like you said, that voice can shift day to day. It can give us a lot of problems. That E and F above middle C, where everybody deals with the break, becomes like a nightmare. How do you help those students? Because they're tricky.
While not every testosterone dominant student has a strong falsetto, consistently organizing and allowing the students to experience that sound is so helpful, because what happens with a lot of these tenors and basses in our choirs when they're learning music, they don't have that ability to necessarily just flip over where they're just where they just flip into that higher register when they're just learning the song. So they're learning notes, rhythms, they're looking at words, they're trying to follow the page, they're trying to hear the people around us. I mean, just think of all the factors that they have against them. So the idea of vocal technique really goes out the window at that time when they're just learning songs. So if through using falsetto, bringing the falsetto down, doing sort of rapid exercise, just getting the voice move up and down through that higher range in a really light fashion, it doesn't have to have a lot of volume. It allows the boys to sing those notes, learn those notes, and then later figure out how much chest voice they can put into those to sing a line and also blend with the other people in their voice part. But it's a lot of movements, a lot of patience, and I think that we have to realize that most of these boys will be baritones just by, let's talk about statistics.
Yes, for baritones.
That said, that we need to have tenors in our choir, and I'm just going to do a little shout out for our voice teachers and a little shout out for the choral directors at the high school level. We need to have conversations on both sides, because sometimes a choir director just has to have that student singing tenor because they need tenors in the choir. It's just that simple. But how we navigate that as teachers, how we be mindful of any sort of trash talking. Not that they do it, but I'm just kind of saying, let's put it out there. Have the conversations with the voice teachers, have the conversations with the choral directors, so that you can partner together and help the student find their voice in the best possible way and be a really valid contributing member of the ensemble. So that's part of it.
Awesome. I like that idea of being a contributing member of the ensemble, getting them to find their place and what they offer. All right, so now you've kind of mentioned and touched on this a little bit, is this idea of vocal models in popular styles and that they have an impact on what you do. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean with that?
It was flipping through the stations on the way home. I was listening to Dua Lipa, and I started singing along. And I couldn't get over how low she sings in her songs. And I happen to like it. It's fine. But what I recognize is that if our students are singing along with that and they find that sound aspirational, it becomes a problem no differently than if a student wants to be Idina Menzel. It's just a different kind of voice sound. It's a different kind of voice quality. Quality, not good or bad, but just the kinds of sounds that they're making. And these are people that are much older, and it is really difficult to discern what sounds are the singers making and what are they not making. The engineering has become so good and so much a part of the aesthetic of contemporary music that students are trying to mimic engineered electric sounds. I mean, I'll just say that they sound electric. What I really encourage students to do is go on YouTube, which is an amazing resource. If you aren't going down rabbit holes on YouTube, you're missing out. And find videos of people like Miley Cyrus singing without a microphone. Find a picture of or a video of Katy Perry singing without a microphone, and share these with students and just show them. The students will make the judgments for themselves, and they don't have to be good, bad, or indifferent, but ask the critical question: what is the singer putting into the microphone, and what is the job of the technicians on the other side to give the singer the sound that we as consumers want?
Yeah.
And to allow students to understand the difference in that is really critical for their success as singers, so that they are really making natural, functional sounds with their voice. And then if they have a really good recording engineer on the other side, do with it what they wish.
That's a good point. It's I have students right now that have a casting director telling them to really work on straight tone in their singing and all of their pop rock stuff. And okay, fine, I get it, I'll help you do that. But I was trying to help the students understand that there is an app now that's $49.99 that you press a button, it analyzes every pitch inside of your song, and it gets rid of most of the vibrato for you. And it's auto-tuned. It used to be, when I first got my first copy of AutoTune, it was $799. So, I mean, it used to be that it wasn't like consumer friendly. Now you can pick it up easily, right? And you can run it in GarageBand. You don't even need to have Pro Tools. It used to be you had to have a higher end recording system to run it. You don't anymore. And they don't understand that even some of these cover singers that they see on YouTube are auto-tuning their voice. And auto-tune isn't only about pitch, it's about that vibrato and the way any wavering and sliding. And they take that out. Those students, I like how you said they're trying to sing electronically, but it's their acoustic voice. It causes a lot of problems, right?
There's an art, it makes me laugh only that there's an article that's been going around the choral circles. I think Kari Reagan posted it yesterday on Facebook. Shout out to her, follow her, learn from her.
Yep.
And this article is about straight tone and sopranos for choral singing, and what are we doing to our poor sopranos? And it's so funny. I wish that the contemporary and classical worlds of voice teachers, we've gone a long way, but I think that we're experiencing the same kinds of issues that just look different based on the style and repertoire, but they're the same exact problems, and they have the same exact effects on the voice. And we really have to start these conversations about this. I guess in some ways, I'm really fortunate that the students that I teach, while they are going out into their communities, into their schools, looking for the feedback of, I want the solo, I want the lead role. When you're starting to talk about professional gigs where they need the money to make these changes in their voice, it becomes a real conundrum for us voice teachers, and to allow them to make all these different sounds, to explore all these different sounds and figure out how to do it so that they can not only enjoy their voices, feel satisfied with their voices, but become marketable is and not easy.
No. And I think it's just important, before we jump into this next question, it's important though to also point out that opera recordings are processed too. And so, I don't think that everyone understands that, but they're recording opera singers with mics 30 foot away, where when you're in a lesson, you're listening to them 8 foot away, or now through Zoom. And then in order to smooth out those recordings, they're still using equalization. They're compressing those recordings. And so they end up sounding smoother than a real opera singer does 8 foot away. And I think that, a lot of times people look and go, oh yeah, well, pop music always processes everything. But Metropolitan Opera does too on its broadcasts, and it does make a difference.
Hearing those voices live, it is a different experience. And if you get the chance to hear some of these people in small really close quarters, a lot of opera singers close up don't really sound that pleasant because of the formants that they need to have is just to be amplified.
Yeah.
So we really need to be mindful of what those strategies are and acknowledge them with our students and give them the sort of feedback to say, it's okay to sound the way that you want to sound.
I like that. Sound the way that you want to sound. It's good.
Hey, before we jump into the next one, just wanted to clarify on the straight tone with, the auto tuning. That's not the same straight tone that you would hear in sacred music like Bach or Palestrina, where you have the ensemble trying to sing a little more straight tone. Or would you say that's kind of the same thing? It's just now we've got a different version of it.
Well, we don't know. We've made sort of aesthetic judgments on these voices to a certain extent, and I know that voices will blend a little easier if you remove the vibrato.
Mhm.
But the pitch matching for that becomes, we know that vibrato is an oscillation of pitch, it's an oscillation of volume. When you are, when there is no movement of that pitch whatsoever, you have to be really in tune to make that happen. And I think that it, well, for me, it's just not my real aesthetic in terms of what I like to listen to. I think John Elliott Gardner and the English Baroque soloists, I think that they're using mostly straight tone, but 30 years ago, I think it was much straighter than it is now. And I think that we may be saying to some of these singers, you know what, sing the way that you do, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because there's still the Davids and Latour book that's out now. It's a book geared towards choral directors and also private teachers. It's got one of the best chapters on vibrato that I've read, full of research information. Check it out. But they say in there that there's a lot we don't know. I mean, that we used to think that it was primarily the cricothyroid muscle that was doing a lot of the creating of the vibrato, but now we're starting to think that probably not. There's other muscles involved, but the only way to check that is to stick EMG needles through people's necks directly into the cricothyroid muscle and the thyroarytenoid muscle. And for some odd reason, people are like against that.
No one wants to sign up for that test.
Every time somebody's like, I want to know more about vibrato, it's like, great, let's stick some needles in your neck. We can figure this out. And they're all of a sudden like, no, I don't want to do that. So that kind of slows research, right, a little bit. But, there's a lot of interesting stuff in that book chapter, looking at all the different things that contribute. And really what it comes down to is we don't have the full answer. There is a resonance component. So I think probably the tricky thing with early music is you are trying to do straight tone with a bit of acoustic resonance. Because you are singing with some sort of instruments. Now it's a smaller orchestra than you see with Puccini, Verdi, Wagner. So it's also a change in demands. But in pop music, you're just trying to straight tone to the microphone that's a few inches away. So that's a real interesting question, Mike. It'd be interesting. We've never had an early music specialist on. Maybe we need to jump on that at some point.
Yeah, I was just drawing a parallel, so I did not mean to throw you a curveball on that one. So
curveballs. That's why he's on the show.
Yeah, all right. Smash it. Another home run. Okay, so Sonia asked Matt, what was that text, the book that you just quoted, that chapter? If you could grab that.
Davidson Tour. If you want to grab this next question, get started, I'll grab a link for it. We'll throw
Great. And then Alice, we'll be right with you. We'll circle back. So jump into this next question. This is great. Goal setting. How do you establish goals for your students? Do you have any best, practices, tips you want to share with everyone?
How do I establish goals? I didn't quite hear.
Yeah, goal setting. So, how to make progress, how to kind of set the next step, the next goal with each, the students, or it could be the ensemble. I don't know if you meant everybody collectively or individually, but
a little bit of both. Yeah.
I love to have students journaling. I love to have students writing and reflecting about what they're doing. And I think that what we need to do for our students is develop a common vocabulary that we can use to describe sounds. And I like to use functional language, but I'm okay with students using their own language as long as we can both understand what it means. So let's say that I have a student maybe a student with synesthesia who says that sound is blue. My first question would be, well, what do you mean by blue? And for them, they could say, well, it looks blue to me. Then I might ask, what hue of blue? Or if a student says that's my buzzy sound. Okay, so do you feel the buzzy? Does it sound buzzy? Asking those sorts of questions so that we can develop a common vocabulary so that when a student is making goals, they use language that allows both of us to continue the dialogue. A goal in singing, there can be sort of the monthly goals or the small short-term goals, and then there are goals 5 years from now. What do you want to be doing with your voice 5 years from now? So establishing those sort of increments of time are so important. When the students are singing in a lesson, typically the first question I ask them about when I want feedback, because I don't give them the feedback necessarily, I ask them for the feedback, I'll always go to feel first. What does that feel like? And just so that I hear something, they feel something, and I see if the answers sort of match in our common vocabulary. Probably the last thing I ask them is, well, did you like that sound? Because if the sound feels bad to the student, no matter how much you can convince them that it's the right sound, they will never perceive it as such because it's the sound that feels bad. So setting the goals of having them feel sounds that feel good so that when they sing, they're satisfied by those sounds, that they're feeling good about the sounds that they're creating, that will ultimately lead down the road to sounds that they like. It's that simple. If a student is constantly going, it kind of doesn't matter if we like the sound or not. How does it feel? And if the student doesn't even recognize that that doesn't feel so great to make, we have to come up with some common vocabulary and goal set about creating words that describe voices. Find all the words that you can to describe a voice, and you'll be surprised at how many words the students can brainstorm within a room, just so that they're developing a common vocabulary and a vocabulary that allows them to process these concepts.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's such an important point is letting them help guide the way on vocabulary because we learn so much by the way they describe their own voices. Great. We have one question over here. Let's pop in here. Alice asks, I'll read it over here because it's, I guess, what suggestions do you have for young singers with poor pitch acuity? Can they be trained to have excellent pitch or just some improved pitch? How would you help them? I never tell a student they have a bad voice. They may become an adult who make budget decisions about a music program. That is very insightful. 100%. Good point. Excellent point. So what's your answer to that, Ed? How do you help them with that?
The pitch?
Yeah.
We'll start with, because a lot of it is experience. There are students who have trouble matching simple patterns. And then there are students who may tend to flat in certain places in their voice or tend to sharp in certain places in their voice. So we can treat those as two different things. A lot of pitch matching, I think, goes away with time and experience and encouragement. I think that there are some students who will find that app on their phone that navigates if they're singing in tune or not. And it just gets them into trouble because they actually are just looking at a machine to tell them that they're right rather than actually hearing anything. It's sort of like taking the process of hearing and listening out of the equation and just asking a machine to do it. God forbid they have to go from one voice to the next. I love solfege, maybe more than the students do. It's really important that they have some sort of sense of the scale. In my next lifetime, when I rule the world, I'm going to create something that is not the 5 lines and 4 spaces of the staff, because when students look at it, they see a pattern, line, space, line, space, line, space. But they don't realize that in the treble clef, the bottom line to the bottom space is a half step, though the bottom space of the second line is a whole step. I mean, how confusing is that? It makes absolutely no sense. And as I start seeing their sort of their confusion around these concepts, you understand why students tend to sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, because they think that it looks, especially if you're in the key of C, line, space would make sense that way. So sometimes those visual cues are confusing to students.
Interesting.
I find that for a lot of students who are stuck in chest voice, that the pitch problem will arise from a functional issue, not from an auditory issue. So if the girl is bringing her chest voice up, there's going to be a ceiling that they're going to hit. And well, of course, they're going to sing flat on that. So sometimes having students sing either in falsetto, all of a sudden they sing in tune because that's a more unfamiliar part of their voice. It's not as stuck. That can take care of itself. In treble voices, sometimes just if it's in pure head voice, some of those situations take care of themselves. I think it's also important from a pedagogical standpoint that way back when, there used to be a lot of premium placed on the breath as the barometer of whether the student was singing in tune or not. And I think that if a student, because we have those students, Mr. Reisert, how high should I jump? How high? And they will do it for you. It's important that we tell students that just by pushing more air through the system, you'll just get a louder note that's out of tune rather than a note that actually is in tune.
Yeah. In fact, more breath will tend to make them sharp if they shove too much at it. And if they're young and they have that mutational chink, it just blows those folds apart. I've never thought about that before, but you're right. I mean, that is an old idea that we had that we've now got science to back up. It's actually probably more harm than good.
Right. And also, I think that something that's been really wonderful in the last, college a cappella groups have been around for a long time, and they've filtered down to the high school level. And the two groups that I have at my school have been around for about 15 years. And what's been really extraordinary is that the pitch matching from these clubs that students are running has become even better because they're just doing it a lot, and they're doing it a cappella, and they are hearing themselves blend with other voices. We know that the well-temperedness of a piano makes it innately out of tune. And if we're using a piano too much to try to coax tuning out of the student, they can get into trouble. I'm always fascinated that there are some really, 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 really high level choirs that get out there. They perform at the ACDA National Conference, and you can tell that they've probably practiced a cappella maybe even too much, that the piano just sounds like a couple cents off. The choir is so in tune with itself, and the instrument just isn't, it can't adjust itself. So it's just ever so slightly every once in a while, but there's that little fight that you see every once in a while. And it's like sport for me. It's like, okay, who's going to win?
That's interesting. I think the other thing too to mention, I mean, we talk a lot about this, you and I talk about the motor skill and the motor learning process. I'd say a lot of this pitch accuracy from you talking about the muscles and everything else, it's a motor skill as much as anything, isn't it?
It is the idea of repetition. I think that there is some room for students to do things as wrong as they can so that they can sort of exaggerate some of those wrong behaviors. I think it's fun to ask students to sing slightly off pitch just to see what it feels like to sort of miss tune. There are exercises that you can do with students and with choirs where, okay, so let's go the distance of a major second. How long can we take to slide from one note all the way up to major second? So the students are really hearing all of those notes in between. Our Western ears impact us, certainly, allowing them to hear music of world cultures that don't necessarily use the diatonic scale in the way that we do.
Yeah.
We don't even use the diatonic scale. To hear those sort of experiences is really enlightening for students so that they can hear that, well, we're not always right with pitch. So there's room in our world cultures for this.
That's a good point. It's probably really important to be discussing world music with students to make sure that they are aware of that. It's a great point. Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, so it made me think with the slides, like, and anytime I hear pitch accuracy, I immediately think, okay, registration, cricothyroid, stretching. So I'm just wondering, can you break down maybe from a registration standpoint some exercises and what's going on with the muscles specifically that can help people with the pitch accuracy?
So with the muscles, registration can often be tied to volume. If a student, again, this is back to sort of overblowing the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Students are able to come back on the volume, even finding some ways to hear. So we often do that exercise where the students have their hands in front of their ears, hands behind their ears, so that they have those two feelings of how they listen. I talk about, and I know you asked about muscles, but I think that there's this idea of hearing that becomes a part of it, that some of these students who are having trouble with pitch, I call them sort of high input students, where there's a lot of information coming from the outside world into their ears that's confusing to them. And that might even be part of the sounds that they hear coming out of their mouths in terms of the way that they perceive those sounds. Again, the chest voice dominant students, if the vowel sounds tend to be too dark, that just natural acoustics will make the sounds seem flat, even when they're kind of not, but aesthetically for the listener, they'll sound a little flat. I'm a teacher that will deal a lot in bright vowels, not overly bright vowels, but just bright sounds, and allow students that, in spite of the aesthetic being a lot of dark singing, we hear our elite singers at the Met using much darker sounds than we would hear back in the Robert Merrill, Roberta Peters days. And that darkening can tend to make the sound seem flat, even when it isn't. So choosing a brighter vowel, choosing an E sound, so that the sound gets maybe that little upper edge, will also impact pitch if the student is flatting to a certain sense. I don't know why. I don't have a lot of students that sing sharp, and I don't know. Like, I know that a lot of people talk about that, but that has not been something that I encounter a lot. Maybe it's just my own sense of pitch. But I think that it's an overdriving machine. It will tend to sharp.
I think part of singing sharp is also having vocal folds that are strong enough to hold together firmly enough for you to blast too much air at them, right? Because if they're weak vocal folds, you blast more air at them, they just fall apart. But once they get stronger in older age, and then if you're using too much abdominal contraction, you're just shooting too much air pressure, and the air pressure drives the pitch too sharp. Maybe because I think you're right about that. Hearing students sing sharp in high school is rare in our, what I hear as well. I think, Mike, what you were just trying to get to this point, I think, is Mike loves to talk about balancing registration, and just the idea that, and muscularly, that if a student's too thyroarytenoid dominant, then they never work the CT, then they're not going to have the strength to elongate the vocal fold. And if they only live in a head down world of head voice down, then they don't have the contraction of the thyroarytenoid muscle necessary to balance in the middle and be accurate in pitch. So it really is about both of them coming together.
Right. And depending on the style, finding out how TA dominant that mix needs to be to make it sound aesthetically right to our listening ears.
Yeah. Yelling, that's always the way to go. If you're belting, it's just yelling, right?
And as a teacher, yelling always works.
Edri popped in, and great to see you, Edri. She's going to be on the show here a little bit later soon, at the end of the month. But she mentioned, too, if they're nervous, they will go sharp at times. And that's a good point, is that, a lot of times their state of being in a performance situation, those nerves kick in, and all these kind of things can just go all over the place.
Yeah, and we are so fortunate that we have so much electronic technology at our disposal. Nearly every student that I teach has some sort of a phone with some sort of recording on it, and just allowing them to record some of what they're doing, then play it back, is just such quick, easy feedback. You don't have to have fancy equipment, but the students will have that. And I'll say, when you're at home and you're practicing on your own, put it in your phone and just listen to it. They love using their phones.
Yeah, that's
easy.
good. Well, that kind of is a nice segue into this other question, which is what everybody wants to know: how do you get them to practice? So, what are your thoughts on how we get them to practice? Because we know it's a motor skill and they have to do it, and they want to, but yet they don't. So, how do you deal with all of that?
Mike asked me before we even started, and he asked this question, and I wanted to make sure that I fit this in somewhere. So, why do people sometimes have a lower limit on the age of students that they'll take? And I think it's this. I think that there's a big difference between a parent wanting their child to take voice lessons and a child wanting to take voice lessons. And if a child said, you know, Mom, for Christmas, can I get voice lessons? That's very different than saying, you know what, sweetie, you sing so beautifully. Let me give you voice lessons and see if you like it. Because there is a point in time where our music making is work. It's that simple. And I think that just my experience at conservatory, you would see those people that maybe around their sophomore year when they realized that sitting in a practice room in solitude and working on these skills on whatever instrument, there were sometimes you really didn't want to be there and it becomes work. So
Right.
So I think that what we need to do as teachers is encourage really small amounts of practice that are consistent. And so many students who want to please, I'll start off, I want you to sing and practice for 5 minutes. And when they're just starting off, it might be just singing along with their recorded lesson in a really thoughtful and mindful way. 5 minutes. And a lot of these students will say, well, Ed actually means 25 minutes. So I'll do 25 minutes, or even worse, because he really wants me to do 25 minutes instead of 5 minutes, I'm not going to do it at all because it's too overwhelming. And what I try to do is establish the practice of singing for 5 minutes and then stop it. I was working with an elite singer once, and on the piano while we were working, they had a timer on their phone, and when they saw it get to about 75 minutes, they're like, okay, we're done. And it wasn't that she couldn't keep singing. She just thought, okay, that's enough singing for the day. So the students need to recognize that small amounts of singing at their age level is a lot for that instrument, for the voice. It's different from sitting in the piano practice or piano when you're in 7th grade and sitting and playing Clementi sonatas for 2 hours. You can do that a little bit more easily. The voice isn't like that. So to get them to practice, start off with 5 minutes, and as a teacher, mean it. 5 minutes, 4 out of the 7 days, or 5 out of the 7 days. And I want you to do 5 minutes. And once they develop that sense of practice and that they can make really good use of 5 minutes, then you go to 10. I think it's important also in our lessons to allow students to practice in front of us without our assistance and without our guidance. It's really illuminating because I think that we sort of think that the students have the skills of drilling small sections on their own or working on small technical skills that are really specific. And students will often sing from the beginning of the song till the end of the song. So we have to model those behaviors within our lessons. So here are 8 bars of the Ash Grove. Let's work on those 8 bars. What's one thing that you would do? What's the next thing you would do? And asking the student, okay, I can sing this on neutral syllables. I can sing this just on an ooh. I can sing it on a hum. I can slow it down to see if I can sing the long phrases. I'll speed it up to make the phrases easier. Gradually doing all these strategies and demonstrating all these strategies in lessons, you have to say that this is how we practice. This is the kind of thing that you're going to do at home. And just encouraging them every time they do 5 minutes, encouraging that that's going to help them have success.
Oh, that's great. And I like the idea of incremental practice and building them up from it, because that's way more achievable for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think starting with 5 minutes is an easy goal. Everybody out there, if you didn't do your 5 minutes today, get busy. It's not over yet. So, okay, jumping into the next question. And you mentioned before collaboration.
Can I just say, for any student who watches commercials or watches network TV, if you're watching Riverdale, watch one section, go upstairs, and during the commercials, practice that amount of time. There's about 3 or 4 minutes right there. And then you don't have to sit and watch the commercials.
Nice. I like it.
Good tip. Good tip, guys. Okay, so you were talking before about collaboration. So I just wonder with this one, we got this question about, how do teachers establish relationships with the choir directors in their community, or vice versa? What kind of relationships do you have with the private voice teachers in your community?
I make phone calls. In my mind, I have nothing to hide in terms of what I do, and I am glad to listen. I want to create those relationships because we as adults can't allow our students to become the pawns of our aesthetic tastes, our pedagogy, our belief in what we think is right. It's just not fair. We have to be the adults in this situation and have these conversations. That said, I know the choir directors in my area. I've watched them work because I invite myself to their rehearsals. And I might just say, hey, you have a select choir rehearsal. Can I sit in on it one night? So I can see the kinds of language that they're using. And often what I'm noticing is that the goals are the same and the language is just different. So I might say um, to a student, when your choir director, Mr. X, says use your light sound, what does that mean to you? For us, that might be a light mix. It might be falsetto-y. It might, and just interfacing so that they know the different senses of language. I think it's also important that, excuse me, for a student who's in a choir that's accustomed to the kinds of things that we value, balance and blend in a choral setting, that we give them permission to know that our solo voice is just a different entity. And to develop that vocabulary, it might say, okay, this is going to be your choral sound. This is going to be your solo sound. So that the students really can bifurcate the two and understand what kind of behaviors they need to do. Back to pleasing the person that they're working for. I want them to be productive members of their ensembles and their choirs. And I don't want to think that, oh, well, Ed told them this, so they're not going to be productive members. I want them to be respectful to all their teachers and learn from all their teachers. So I have relationships with all these people. I talk to them. I ask them if I notice a issue that a student has with their voice. I'll make a phone call and I'll just say, I'm sort of noticing this. And I'm not saying that you're doing it. I'm not saying that your pedagogy is doing this. I'm not saying anything. I'm noticing this. Are you noticing this? And having that conversation. Just working together.
It's great. Yeah, like I always like to say, we're better as a team when we're working together. And I hate when our students are put in the middle, and the students and the choir director doesn't want to have those conversations and they just disagree with everything. And especially worse is when you find out they're a trumpet player. And that's serious. Here in wonderful Winchester, Virginia, we have a choir director who's a trumpet player who thinks they know more about voice pedagogy than any of the faculty at Shenandoah. And it's so sad to watch kids getting injured consistently. And you're sitting back and going, this is so unnecessary. And that's hard. So it's refreshing to know there's people out there who are building those relationships and taking it on themselves. It's so important.
We just have to be the adults in this situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, last question here of the evening. This has been a great conversation. Lots of love over in the chat box. A lot of teachers who are tuning in, we're all in the same boat. So I am just, always interested in how other teachers are coping with the challenges of teaching music during COVID. And what have you been doing? Are you in person or are you online? How's this working?
So the students that I teach at the high school are on a hybrid model. They come into school Monday, Tuesday, every other Wednesday, or every other Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we see students in school either the first half or the second half of the week. Approximately half of the students at the school are now fully virtual. So there's students who I have not seen in person this year, and that's really, really hard. Carving out time to just talk to the students and foster those relationships has been really important for me. I made the decision early on. This isn't everybody's cup of tea, but this is what I chose to do. And I'm fortunate that I am in a district that allows a lot of creativity on the parts of the teachers and a lot of autonomy on the part of the teachers. And I decided early on, I've sort of abandoned the choral thing this year. And it's not that we're not singing a lot, but I've abandoned the idea of singing choral music for now. Reason being is that if I have an alto that's been totally virtual and they are singing the same note over and over with no sense of harmonization and no ability to sing with others to see how that note fits in with other parts. I think it's a real, I can't imagine that is sustaining. There's that song that makes the around the cabaret circles, the altos lament. It's totally true, and that's why it's funny. So so providing students the opportunity to sing something more than that, I thought was critical. So this year I've done a lot of work where the students are self-selecting solo literature, and I'm allowing a variety of genres. I'm insisting on a variety of genres. So we started the year with just teach me something, like let me know something about you, and just sing a song for me that tells you something about yourself. During the month of January, we talked, well, actually, was it January? Earlier this year, we talked about songs that are associated with our heritage, with the nationality. I was talking, I know that Lift Every Voice and Sing had become very much in the news, and I thought it was really important to do that before Black History Month. So we just did, it might have been November. And we also did the national anthem, which the students didn't realize has 3 verses and it's really hard to sing. We also talked about Whitney Houston and her contribution to how we hear that song now. And we even talked about Roseanne Arnold and the problems that she had by just sort of making fun of the national anthem. So these become sort of cultural conversations that we can have. So the students have been doing solo literature, and they've been doing a lot of videos and a lot of work on expressive singing. And I'm finding that there are a lot of the students who are less secure singers have grown immensely in this process because they are actually feeling that they can accomplish the songs that I'm giving them and the songs that they're choosing, because they are lightly choosing songs that they know that they'll sound good doing. Not that I'm not pushing them in different directions, but I'm allowing them to feel a high level of satisfaction in their music making. Look, these students are sitting in front of screens all day. Some of them who are quiet or more introverted may not even unmute unless asked by the teacher to do so. So they might be sitting in their bedroom and learning and being isolated all day. If this is an opportunity for them to even strategize how they are going to wait for their parents to go to the grocery store so that they can make their recording and not feel nervous about being heard, what a great exercise for them to start feeling confident. I have students making videos in cars, all sorts of things, and they're being really creative about, okay, where do I find that place where I can sing freely and well in my own space so that I can feel really good about being a music maker, so that on the other side of this, what I'm hoping in September, fingers crossed, that they come back and they just feel really ready to sing, and then the behaviors of choral singing will come along. I don't think that these students are going to be behind in any way. I think it's just going to look different, and we have to encourage that difference as being okay for now.
Oh, that's what a great way to work with them. Yeah, it's hard. Some kids are stuck at home in some really rough situations, and it's really sad. And it's great that you're giving them that outlet. It's amazing. All right, one last curveball, just because I love to do this to you.
Great.
You are currently the chair of the implementation committee, the Pan American Vocology Association, as you are the organization. So I was on the board of directors a while ago when this conversation first started. It is so exciting to know there's an implementation committee. So can you tell us about where we are on the pathway to having PAVA recognized vocologists?
Okay. I always have to give a shout out to Lita Scarce, who I just think the world of. She brought me on to the initial credentialing committee back in 2015. We've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And through this process, the PAVA Recognized Vocologist is a initiative that PAVA is creating, where they're finding a way to recognize people in terms of a broad scope of knowledge and a deep level of expertise in their fields. So we've come up with a 2-pronged plan for this evaluation. Part of it is going to be a written test. Initially, we had about 15 different subcategories for the test, everything from amplified and unamplified singing to biomechanics to animal vocalization, a really huge array, because we want our vocalists to have a broad base of knowledge. On the other hand, we also have a high-level portfolio that's going to be vetted through a rubric that we create. And this portfolio is going to have two different parts. One is to demonstrate yourself as an expert in your own field. So I might be the one that says, you know what, choral singing is going to be the place where I'm going to demonstrate my expertise, showing programs, showing how much I've taught, where I've taught, the kinds of church choirs that I've worked with in that range, and also demonstrating a range of knowledge. So the research that I presented, Voice Foundation, I could talk about that. I could talk about being working in the field of voice habilitation, working as a private voice teacher, and finding other places that I have shown some level of understanding and demonstrated some expertise, but maybe not to the level of the other things. So we have those two different pieces that are coming together. The test is nearly complete, and we found in our work that we still have need for greater depth. So we've even added some sections, subsections of testing that we're going to include. And I am on a committee with incredible people. I hate doing lists when I don't have it in front of me. Ken Bozeman, who is just amazing in his field and wonderfully humble and knows so much. Mary Sandage, rock star. Marcy Rosenberg, another rock star. Get her book, The Vocal Athlete, if you haven't already. Amanda Flynn, who is a wonderful voice teacher in the city and working at Pace, and she's just outstanding. And Troy Castle, Shenandoah graduate, woo, who is just a gentle giant and a rock star in his own way. And this committee, we are figuring out a way to get this out to our membership. And what we hope is that this will be a compelling reason and a compelling why to join the organization. I need to do a quick shout out for PAVA, the Pan American Vocology Association. Become a member. I think that there is no organization out there that gives you access to people that you never thought that you could have access to. So going to the symposia, you just meet people. These conferences are designed to get to know other people and to make connections and to ask questions and call on people that you don't know and learn from them. And it's just been a wonderful, really formative organization for me. And I'm so proud to do the work that I get to do, and I'm so proud to work alongside people that I get to work with. So look into it. Keep an eye open for it. It's good stuff that's going to go on.
Yeah, it's exciting. Definitely. I can't wait till it's there. It's been a long time in the making. Dr. Ingo teaches a dream for a long time, and it's taken an entire army to get it to this point. So thank you for your leadership in that. You're doing the entire profession a massive, massive service.
Now, did you mention a date? I know maybe I fell asleep for a second, but did you say a date when this comes? What was that date?
That's not the question to ask. The date keeps rolling.
Okay, sorry, sore subject.
We have a timeline, fellas. So within the last month, the board of directors of PAVA have decided that they are going to have the August symposium will be also online. There'll be a fully virtual symposium. The August 2020 symposium was such a success and a model for how you should do online learning and online conferences. It didn't feel like you were online at all. They even had dance parties online. It felt just like a conference where you could walk to the water cooler and talk to that person you hadn't seen. So because we were doing that, we were going to do our initial, like a really large beta testing of the examination in the fall. We are currently coming up with a plan B on that because we want to stick to that date. Probably February or this is February, probably March of this year, we are going to have an update for our membership. We are hoping that we can start accepting portfolios in January. And hopefully at the Symposium 2022, we will acknowledge our first PAVA recognized vocalists.
That's incredible. That's really amazing.
Very
well, hey, Ed, it's been amazing having you here tonight. Thank you for all of the information you've dropped. If you tuned in late to the show, we'll leave this up in the archives on the voicelessons.com Facebook page, on the voicelessons.com YouTube channel. You'll be able to go back and watch that. If some of the anatomical terms that you heard today are coming at you out of left field, you have no idea what we're talking about, I'll tell you about a brand new course we have. This is a course that I put together with Mike. It's called How the Voice Works. It's a 4-hour, a whole 4-hour series. We shot it in Hollywood, so it's produced at a professional level, full of resources, stroboscopy videos, MRI videos that you get to look at, vocal exercises. Will help you make sense of some of these things that we were talking about tonight if you're not familiar with that. It's a product that's really aimed for singers. We have a lot of high school choirs that are actually using it, and some college choirs that are using it as well as part of their COVID curriculum. We actually have special pricing for that. So if you're here tonight and you're thinking, oh, I'd love something to do for the rest of the spring semester to teach these kids about what Ed just told you, be sure to check that out. There's still good information in there, even for teachers, if you're not familiar with the anatomy as well as you would like to be. And then also got to give a quick shout out for Ed's new class that he's teaching. As we mentioned at the top of the show, he's one of our senior faculty at the CCM Institute. And so if you jump on over to ccminstitute.com and you look at the schedule of courses, you're going to find out that Ed is teaching an entire 3-week intensive on working with young singers. So if you found this was interesting to you and you're looking to get more information, be sure to check that out. We are offering a very limited amount of scholarships, but it's a COVID world. We've never offered scholarships until last year, the first time we did it because it was COVID. This year, we're going to do it again. So the regular price for courses is $415, but if you have been economically impacted by COVID-19, you're really suffering from everything that's gone on, and you could use a boost to your teaching that you think will help you make more money and recover economically from this situation, the scholarship's for you. We want to help our fellow teachers to make sure that people who are down in their luck right now have something to help give them new skills and lift them up so they can come out on the other side even better than where they are. So, check that out. Like we said, check out the course through voicelessons.com, How the Voice Works, as Mike mentioned at the top of the show. There's also a new teacher matching service. So if you're sitting there going, I want to teach more and I don't have enough students, there are about, I'm not even going to guess the number, but it's thousands that are coming through the voicelessons.com platform. There's people coming in every single day saying they want a teacher. You go through a teacher matching form that says, hey, the student does, it says, these are the things I'm looking for. The teacher fills out a form on their side. And then because Mike's a computer genius as well as, voice genius, Mike has created an entire algorithm that goes through using artificial intelligence or some other unicorn magic that he does and helps match up based off of that criteria who's going to be a good fit for you. And it's a great way for you to get leads to build up your studio because there are students worldwide who are looking for teachers right now. And again, this whole platform is about helping teachers, empowering teachers to make the kind of living and have the kind of career they want. So jump on over to voicelessons.com or contact Mike directly either through the Facebook page or through the website. That'll help you out. Ed, you're incredible. It's always a joy to have you on here. And we'll have to do it again. Maybe come back and just do regular Q&A at some point in time. But
thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yes, Ed, good to see you again. Great having you on. I miss our first cocktail that we had a couple years ago, so I can't wait. Couple more seasons. So
I know, man. Hopefully we'll be back at these conferences real soon. So if you're tuning in for the first time, we do this every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Next week, we have the one and only Maddie Tarbox, an excellent private teacher, functional based. She's going to be coming on doing singer Q&A. She's going to be taking questions from our database. We have hundreds and hundreds of questions all the time. She's going to be giving you evidence-based answers to those technique questions. That'll help you out, fill in some of the blanks on this. And, if you can't catch it live, always check. We usually leave the live Q&As up on the Facebook page and the YouTube page for about a month or two. All of our interviews with special guests are up there permanently, but be sure to catch those. They're just full of hours and hours of information as our free service to the community, to the profession, making this world a better place and advancing evidence-based voice pedagogy. So, Mike, thanks for making this platform a reality, for having us host the show. I ended up taking over just because of our schedules, but any final words, Mike, since it's really yours?
Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And again, great to have you on and great to hear just your point of view and everything. So thanks for all that you've done for the profession, and congrats on your success. So, everybody, thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
Good night.
Good night.